Okay. So early on in the Megillah, we have an introduction of Mordechai. This is the fifth verse in the second chapter. Ish Yehudi Haya b'Shushan Abira. There was this Jewish man in Shushan, the capital, Shema Mordechai, etc., etc. It gives his lineage. And then listen to this verse. Asher Hogla Yerushalayim, who had been brought into exile from Jerusalem. Im Hagola Asher Hoglasa, with the exile that had been brought into exile. Im Yechanya Melech Yehuda, Yechanya, one of the last kings before the destruction. Asher Hegla Nebuchadnezzar Melech Bavel, that had been brought to exile by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylonia. How many times is it going to tell us that he was brought into exile? It mentions exile 4 times, and it says that he was brought into exile 3 times. I get the picture. You know, the Gemara compares the writing of the Megillah to the writing of the Torah itself. We know the Torah itself is very cryptic, very cryptic. There are many laws that are learned from a bit of an addition or a bit of a subtraction. Why is it over here that we're told that he went into exile 3 times? Says the Vilna Gaon, you know why it says he went into exile 3 times? Not to emphasize. Very often in the Torah, something is repeated for emphasis. Says the Vilna Gaon, there is no emphasis over here. You know why it says that he went into exile 3 times? Because he went into exile 3 times. If you know the history of the end of the First Temple era, there were different galios, different groups were taken to exile. Says the Vilna Gaon, Mordechai was taken against his will into exile 3 times. If he was taken the first time, what was he doing there the second time? The answer is he couldn't keep away from Yerushalayim. And he had to go back. And each time he was forcibly removed and he went back. Let me read you the holy words of the Vilna Gaon. Amar Hogla Gimel Pa'amim. It says he was exiled 3 times. Asher Hogla Mirushalayim. Asher Hogla Sa. Asher Hogla Lahodia Chibas Eretz Yisrael Elav. Because this man loved the Holy Land. Shebechol Pa'am Chazer Yerushalayim. Each time he was exiled, he ran back. He was not staying outside Yerushalayim. As a matter of fact, the Gemara is wondering about the word Hogla, which seems to indicate that he exiled himself. When it says Hogla, seems that he was involved in it. So the Vilna Gaon says it's not. Don't think the Gemara means that he left on his own volition. What does the Gemara mean when it says he left by himself? It means he kept on coming back, even though he was going to be removed forcibly. So the Megillah depicts it as if he removed himself. Why? Because after he was removed forcibly, he went back, even though he knew he was going to be thrown out again. But he couldn't keep away from Yerushalayim. We're going to learn that that is the feeling of the great tzaddikim towards Yerushalayim. The Gemara, I said the great tzaddikim. Somebody in the crowd here said me too, and I said the great tzaddikim, right? The Gemara later, what I just told you was on Daf Yud Gimel, is on page 13. There's a Gemara later, on page 17, in the Masechta of Megillah, which is explaining the order of the Shmona Esrei. 19 blessings, right? Why is it in the particular order? That's what the Gemara, page 17b in Megillah, is explaining. And it goes bracha by bracha by bracha. You might ask, as some wise women in the crowd did ask, you might ask, what is that doing in Megillah? What does the Shmona Esrei have to do in Megillah? The answer to that question is there's a Mishnah which says that the Megillah cannot be out of order, and that same Mishnah says that the Shmona Esrei cannot be out of order. Hence, we start talking about the Shmona Esrei. So the Gemara is explaining why one bracha, blessing in the Shemona Esrei, follows the other one. One day, God willing, we'll learn it all together. It's fascinating. But the Gemara that we're going to discuss tonight is discussing the juxtaposition of Al HaTzadikim, the bracha which talks about the righteous, to the bracha of Yerushalayim Ircha. One might have thought that they have nothing to do with each other. We talk about the tzaddikim, al tzaddikim, al chasidim, al ziknei amcha beis Israel. We talk about the great leaders of Israel. And then the next blessing talks about Yerushalayim. Any connection, says the Gemara in Megillah? Yes, there's a connection. This is the language of the Gemara. It's very short if you want to write it down. The Gemara asks this question. V'heichon misromemes karnam. The previous bracha spoke about the righteous. So the Talmud asks, when are the righteous in their full glory? When does their horn, their pride, when is it elevated? When are the tzaddikim exalted? So the Gemara's answer is one word. Bolt out of the blue. Birushalayim. Birushalayim. When are tzaddikim in their full glory, in their full pride? Birushalayim. Where does that come from? So for those of you who have spent time in Yerushalayim, you might have seen the following verse on bus stops and various signs. There is a beautiful verse. It's Psalm 122, I believe, verse 6, which reads, and this the Gemara quotes to buttress its idea, Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Yerushalayim. You know that's one. Pray for the peace of Yerushalayim, or ask for peace for Yerushalayim. Yishloyu ohavayich. May those who love you have shalva, have serenity. So that's the way the pasuk goes. Shalu shalom Yerushalayim, seek out the peace of Yerushalayim, pray for the peace of Yerushalayim. Let those who love you have serenity. Great commentary on the Gemara says, who are those that love Yerushalayim? And the Marsha answers the question, you know who those who love Yerushalayim? Elu HaTzadikim. So the Gemara had asked, when did the tzaddikim achieve their pride? When did the tzaddikim, when are they in a place, in a space where they're in their glory? Answer is Yerushalayim. They love Yerushalayim. And that was Mordechai. Mordechai was a lover of Yerushalayim, and therefore, over and over again, although he was forcibly exiled from Yerushalayim, he needed to run back. He needed to get back there, even though it might have been a little dangerous, but he needed to get there because that was his place. That's the place, that's the Jewish home. It's the Jewish home. You know that feeling. When you're visiting Eretz Israel, you leave Yerushalayim, and you come back, you say, whoa, all of Eretz Israel is amazing, but Yerushalayim. One other point about Eretz Israel and Yerushalayim that has to do with the Megillah. When is Purim? 14th of Adar. But that's not the only day that we celebrate Purim. That's not the only day that Klal Yisrael celebrates Purim. There's something called Shushan Purim. For most of us, we know that in Yerushalayim, they celebrate Shushan Purim. In Yerushalayim, Purim is not on the 14th, it's on the 15th. So to put it in my best rabbinical language, what's up with that? Like, why they have a different day? The answer is because in the capital city of Shushan, the war wasn't over until a day later. And therefore the celebration was a day later. So outside of Shushan, they fought on the 13th and they celebrated on the 14th. In Shushan, they fought on the 13th and 14th, and they didn't celebrate till the 15th. So that's the celebration that we have. We have Purim in regular cities and Shushan Purim. And again, many of us know that in Yerushalayim is Shushan Purim, but it's not only Yerushalayim. If you look at the first Mishnah in Maseches Megillah, it tells us that in walled cities from the days of Yehoshua ben Nun, walled cities from the days of Yehoshua. You know who Yehoshua was? The student of Moshe. Hundreds of years before the Purim story. So walled cities in the days of Yehoshua ben Nun, that's right, walled cities in the days of Yehoshua ben Nun, they celebrate on the 15th like Shushan. Why? Why? Okay, I understand why in Shushan the war wasn't over. It was a day later. They celebrated a day later. So Shushan. So to commemorate what went on in Shushan, it's not only Shushan, which is a walled city, it's all walled cities. But what does it have to do with those cities that were walled in the days of Yehoshua? The answer is, says the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, I'll put it in my language, the answer is we're Jews. And because we're Jews, everything is about Eretz Yisrael. Everything is about our homeland. And we're not going to have a celebration which in some way is going to disparage, to disgrace the Holy Land. And if we were going to say any city that's walled at the time of the Purim story, that would be a disgrace to Eretz Yisrael, because Eretz Yisrael was in ruin. Because it was the time of the Babylonian exile. The temple hadn't been built yet. It was the time of the Babylonian exile. So the walled cities in Eretz Yisrael were in ruin. So if they would make a mitzvah, read the Megillah on the 14th in unwalled cities, and the 15th in walled cities at the time of Shushan, that would disgrace Eretz Yisrael. And Jews don't disgrace Eretz Yisrael. Jews don't disgrace their mother and their father. It's part of us. It's part of us. Okay, it's like Rav Nachman Breslov, the great Hasidic master. He says, everywhere I'm going to Eretz Yisrael. I'm going home. It's home. And therefore, I'm not going to say anything bad about Eretz Yisrael. And why is it saying something bad? Well, it's like this. It's like saying something bad. But we don't do that. Just like you don't say something bad about those that are dear to you. You don't say something that's going to come out nasty about your mother, right? Don't say that about my mother. And don't say that about Eretz Yisrael either. You can't. So therefore, what do? To the contrary, we do something which celebrates Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael in its day. Eretz Yisrael, when it was on the rise, when Yehoshua came to conquer Eretz Yisrael, we look at the cities that had walls at the time of Yehoshua, and they read the Megillah, and they celebrate Purim on that day, just like Shushan Habir. The centrality of Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim, to our being. Okay. Let's move on. Let's move on. A little later in the Megillah, in the book of Esther, this is the 4th chapter, the 1st verse. The pasuk says, "Mordechai yoda es kol asher na'asa." Mordechai learned everything that was going on. And then it says, "Vayizak sa'aka gedola umara," and he cried out a bitter cry. So the Gemara asks a very cute question. What was he crying about? Or not was he, what was he crying about? The Jews are going to get killed. But what did he say exactly? Wouldn't it be nice to know, says the Gemara, what he was saying? What did he express? So here we have a debate between the great Rav and Shmuel. These are personalities that you find almost every page of the Talmud. Rav and Shmuel. It's the beginning of the era of the Amoraim. Listen to what they say. Listen to the debate. Rav Omar Gavalibo Shel Haman Me'achashverosh. Haman has elevated his heart, has been elevated over Achashverosh. According to Rav, what he was saying was in his prayer, I shouldn't say prayer, in his cry, he was saying, he was lamenting the fact that Haman was getting the better of Achashverosh. Now, that's very reasonable. You know, let's not get into politics. Please, please, please. Let's not get into politics. But I think it's a great example. Okay? Today in contemporary politics, those people who are against the president and a little sharp in understanding human dynamics, they know what button to push. One of the buttons that they're pushing is they're saying to the president, you know, Elon Musk, he's taken over. Now, that's something that might get under the president's skin, right? Because the president, let's just say he has a bit of an ego. A bit of an ego, right? He's got a bit of an ego. I'm not judging him good president, bad president, Republicans, Democrats. But no, everyone's going to have to agree. The man has a bit of an ego, right? So you tell this fellow, the big of ego, you know, the guy you're appointing to do all these things, again, not getting into good or bad, but he's like taking over the place. Oh, so according to Rav, that's what Mordechai was saying. Mordechai was shrewd. He knew that Achashverosh was as big as an anti-Semite as Haman was, and he was. And he was. But Mordechai was looking for the proper strategy to flip Achashverosh. Achashverosh agreed to the plan. He didn't know, but he agreed to the plan. Right? So what does he go out there saying? He's trying to play with Achashverosh's head. He's saying, Haman's got the better of you. You're letting him lead the country. You're letting him lead the world. That's the opinion of Rav. Shmuel says something else. Shmuel says something which is shocking. Shmuel Amar, Govar Malka Ila'a mi Malka Tata'a. A little Aramaic lingo. Let me translate it. Malka is the word melech, but in Aramaic, Malka Ila'a. The upper king has Govar, has overcome Malka Tata'a, the lower king. The upper king has overcome the lower king. Rashi explains, listen to this. Kinoihu, this is a euphemism. Lehefech, he really meant the opposite, B'loshan Nakiya, but he was talking nicely. Who's the upper king? God. Who's the lower king? Achashverosh. So he said the words, the upper king has overcome the lower king. But he was talking nicely because he didn't want to say something nasty against God. So basically what he really meant was the lower king, Achashverosh, is overcoming the upper king. That's what he meant to say, but he wouldn't say it. Oh boy. What was Mordechai saying? Achashverosh / Haman is overcoming God? What was he saying? What did he mean? Maharsha, we're talking about Rashi. Rashi is the greatest of the early commentaries. Rashi is Reish Shin Yud. There are those that say Rashi, yes, it stands for Reb Shlomo Yitzchaki, Reish Shin Yud. There are others say that Rashi really means Rabban Shel Yisrael. Rashi, Rabban Shel Yisrael. He's the rabbi of Israel because he was the greatest commentary that ever lived, Rashi. That's among the early medieval commentaries, Rashi. The Achronim, the later commentaries, starting about in the period of the 1500s, arguably the greatest commentary on the Talmud is a man by the name, we call him the Maharsha, Morenu Harav Shmuel Idolus. He actually was supported by his mother-in-law, and he took his mother-in-law's last name was Idolus or something like that. To give her honor, he took her name, took her last name. He's the Maharsha. He was considered the deepest of the deepest. He takes a look at the Rashi over here, Rashi's interpretation, and he literally tears his hair out. He says, Rashi, how can you say that? That's what Mordechai was saying? Mordechai was saying that he was screaming out in pain. He was saying that the king below Achashverosh is overcoming God. Oh, in this religion, you don't talk like that. That's called Matiach Devarim Klapi Mala. That's called using tough words against God. And that's a very dangerous thing to do. You watch your mouth. You watch how you talk against God. So Rashi, he doesn't like Rashi's interpretation, or he's wondering what on earth does that mean? How could Rashi say that that's what Mordechai was saying? Because he's saying a real not nice thing about God. Okay, he's crying out in pain, but Mordechai was the leader of the generation. How could he talk like that? So I'm going to present to you today a beautiful answer, which is very important in its value of the hashkafa of Jewish thought. It is supplied by a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Yosef Salanter, not to be confused with Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. This man was a darshan. He was a person who was an incredible sermonizer, you could call him. And he, for many, many years, he lived in the late 1800s, very early 1900s in Yerushalayim. And his sermons, his Divrei Torah, are gorgeous. They're absolutely gorgeous. And this is what he says to answer the Maharsha's question. Excuse me. That was good. Thank you, Mrs. Leiter. Okay. All right. Here we go. Here we go. He reminds us that Mordechai was a card-carrying member of the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, the men of the Great Assembly. The men of the Great Assembly that was founded by Ezra in the era of Mordechai, the same time of Mordechai, towards the beginning of the Second Temple. It included Mordechai and included some of the other great prophets such as Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi. He was one of the great members of this group called Anshe Knesset Hagadola, the men of the Great Assembly. Men of the Great Assembly were responsible for organizing our prayer, very famous for that, and for many other institutionalizations in Jewish life, which they did. And he was one of the major players in the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, the men of the Great Assembly. There is a Gemara in Yoma which explains where they got their name from. One might be tempted to say that it was a large group of rabbis. So it's Anshe Knesset. Knesset means, right, a gathering, a group, and they Anshe, the men of this great assembly. No, says the Gemara, that's not why they were called the men of the great assembly. The Gemara says like this, okay, and this is you might want to get down for the books. This is Gemara Yoma 69b. Amar Rabbi Yoshua, don't be scared by the Hebrew, I'm going to translate. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, No, lama nikra shmon anshe knesses hagadola. Why were they called the men of the great assembly? Answers the Gemara. Shehechziru atara liyoshna. They returned the crown to its original place. What crown? They're called Anshe Knesses Hagadola. They returned the crown to the original place. What crown? Let's explain. Asa Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses came along, Amar, and he praised God. Very famously, we all know this. And he said, Hagodol, Hagibor v'hanora. Moshe Rabbeinu called God the great, powerful, and awesome one. So we say in our davening, right? And for years and years and years, whenever somebody wanted to praise God, they said that. Hakel, Hagodol, Hagibor v'hanora, just like we say in our Shemona Esrei. And actually, the Gemara says you shouldn't say anything more than that. You know why you shouldn't say anything more than that? Because if you start saying more than that, somebody will tap you on the shoulder and say, is that all you have to say? Oh, is that all you have to say? Of course, you don't have any more praise for God, and therefore we just rely on what Moshe said. That's what the Gemara says. Moshe Rabbeinu said, Hakel Godol Hagibor v'hanor. So that's what you say. Don't start making up your own thing, because if you make up your own thing, somebody say, yeah, is that it? So that's what we say. So from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, that's the great praise of God. Hakel Hagodol Hagibor v'hanor. That's what we say. Okay. However, listen to this. Shock of shockers. Asa Yirmiyah, the great prophet Jeremiah, came along, va'amar, and he said, I know God is supposed to be awesome, but I don't see his awesomeness anymore. I see the temple in tatters, and I see goyim mekarkarin behecholo. I see the nations of the world having destroyed the temple and partying in the temple, in the ruined temple. Aye nora osav. Moshe Rabbeinu said, God is awesome. Where's his awe? Like shock and awe. Where's his awe? They don't seem to be afraid of him. There's no awe. They have drunken parties where the temple stood. Where's the awe? So he stopped saying Norah. And he told the Jewish people, he was a leader. He said, we can't say Norah. And why did he say it? This is another discussion we really should talk about, have a lengthy discussion about this. Our prayer has to be honest. So therefore, Yirmiyahu says, I don't see why God is Norah, why God is awesome. Where's it? He's not awesome. Or he's not apparently awesome. We can't say the word Norah. We can't say he's awesome. He took it out of the davening. Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, took it out of the davening. Lo Amar Norah. Asa Daniel, the great Daniel came along. And he said, Goyim mishtabim b'banav. The Gentiles, they're making his children, God's children, subservient. Ayeh gvurosa, where's God's power? I don't see the power. Lo Amar Gibor, he took Gibor out of the davening. So Yirmiyahu took out awesome, Norah, and Daniel came along and he took out powerful. Asu Inhu, the Anshe Knesses Hagadola came along, and they said, Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, you're wrong. And Daniel, you're wrong. I'll show you where God's awe is. I'll show you where God's strength is. And they said like this, Adarabba, to the contrary. Where you don't see the awe, we see the awe. Where you don't see the strength, we see the strength. Adarabba zuhi gvura, this is his gvura. Shekovish es yitro. God's able to control himself. Anshe Knesses Hagadola said, think of what God's sitting up there. His people are so shattered. His people are in such bad shape. And God's able to control himself and not be violent, so to speak. That is God's strength. What do we say in Pirkei Avos? You know the famous line in Pirkei Avos. Eza hagibor hakovesh es yitzro. Who is the strong one? The one who can control himself. God's obviously controlling himself. God's not happy with the state of the Jewish people and what people have done to the Jewish people, but he controls himself. That's his strength. Okay? They went ahead and they said further, Ve'elohei norosov. Where's the awe? She'omoli morish el HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if it wasn't for the fear of God, Heich uma achas shecholim l'skayim beina umos. How can this one little sheep, the Jewish people, one little people, how could they live among the nations of the world? They would have been eaten up. Actually, Rabbi Yaakov Emden and Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz, great thinkers in the 1700s, they both said, the miracle of Jewish survival is a bigger miracle than the splitting of the sea and the exodus from Egypt. The fact that Jewish people have survived, and it's pretty wild now. 2,000 years of exile, it's unbelievable. How is it possible? Because ultimately, God has shown his awe with the Jewish people by preserving us. And therefore, the Anshe Knesset Hagadolah restored the Gibor, the Norah to the davening, that we can now once again call God Gibor v'Norah. So what was the great job of the men of the Great Assembly? They restored the glory and the strength of God. They were able to find the glory, the strength, the awesomeness of God in a world of exile. So that Anshe Knesset Hagadolah, who was one of the major people of the Anshe Knesset Hagadolah? Mordechai. So Mordechai was a person who was worried about the glory of God, because that was the job. That was the greatest task of the Anshe Knesset Hagadolah. What's about to happen to the Jewish people? They're about to be wiped out, man, woman, and child. What's Mordechai's response? God, where is your Norah? Where is your awesome? Where is that fear that the nations of the world are supposed to have for you? You know what people are going to say? They're going to say that the king below has overcome the king above. We tried to restore your awe in the world. You're going to allow it to be taken away if you allow the Jewish people to be wiped out. So he was arguing for the glory of God, for the greatness of God. He was arguing for that Norah, which he and his buddies had brought back to the world. My friends, this message is such an important message, I think, for today. Because the way the Jewish people go, so does God. If the Jewish people are disgraced, God is disgraced. The nations of the world say, as it says the verse in Tehillim, Lama yomru ba'amim ayeh Elohehem. Why should the nations of the world, David HaMelech, say, where is your God, Jew? This was a favorite refrain of the Nazis, Yimach Shemam. Where is your God, Jew? And that is the refrain of haters throughout the ages. When we daven, part of our davening should be for the glory of our God. That was the mission of the Anshe Knesset Hagadolah, to restore people understanding, God is awesome. And that should be something that we should have in mind too. It might be a little lofty, but something, it's I think it's a very, very important idea. Okay. How about one final thought? Let's go from Mordechai to Esther. After all, my friends, it's Megillas Esther. And it's Tainus Esther. Esther is the ultimate hero here. Esther gave her life for the Jewish people. I said in shul the other night, it's funny when we get to the end of the Megillah, and it talks about Mordechai marching into the sunset, and it's like with such pomp and with such honor and such dignity, right? We talk about, you see Mordechai at the end of the Megillah. I always get very sad, because Mordechai ended up okay, and the Jewish people ended up okay, and there's only one person who didn't end up okay, and that was Esther, because Esther didn't leave the palace. What tragedy of tragedies! It's a tragedy which didn't end. When terrible things happen to people, and even if they live happily ever after. But some people are not going to live happily ever after. If the end of the story is positive, we look back. This is what I said in Shul on Shabbos, actually, and Chalo showed this. So we look back at the 6-Day War. The 6-Day War, my friends, was incredibly miraculous. Now, 6 days, people still realize that it means 6 days. But people don't win wars in 6 days, right? Who wins a war in 6 days? It took America longer to control Grenada. It took them longer than 6 days. America, right? Big America over Grenada, which is nothing. And the Israeli army destroyed scores of attacking nations in 6 days. They really won most of the war in 2 or 3 days. They beat Egypt really the first 4 hours of the war. It was supernatural, to the point that the American author James Michener says that in 100 years from now, he really said this, 100 years from now, people are going to look at the history books and say 6 days. No, that's like biblical 6 days. Didn't mean 6 days. It must be a day for a year. It must have been 6 years. Because no, they couldn't have done this. He said that. And it makes a lot of sense. And you read depictions of Israel after the 6-Day War, the joy, the first Shavuos, when Jews streamed to the Kotel. Read depictions of that. It's unbelievable. The joy was unbelievable. But my friends, there were 750 or 800 deaths in the 6-Day War. Most of Klal Yisrael was jubilant for years. But there were 800 families that lost people. They did not live happily ever after. The Jewish people, we hark back to the 6-Day War, is unbelievable. But those families were scarred forever. And that's the way I think of Esther. Poor Esther. When she had to go to Achashverosh, she turned around and said to Mordechai, okay, I'm going to go. You've convinced me it's the right thing to do. But she says the words, kasher avadati avadati. But I'm lost. I will be lost. And our Chazal tell us, you know what she was saying? That this is the first time she was sort of offering herself to Achashverosh. To go to Achashverosh was horrible. She was going to go into Achashverosh, she was going to be violated. So up until this point, she was taken against her will. She's taken against her will. It's against her will. But now it's not against her will. She's actually offering herself to Achashverosh, and therefore she was going to be forbidden to her husband after this. Because now she's, in a sense, she's willfully living with somebody who's not her husband. Mordechai was her husband. So now she's going to be forbidden to her husband. A woman who lives with another man other than her husband is going to be forbidden to her husband. She can't. And that's what she was saying. Kasher avadti avada. She realized it. So here she is. She's lost to her husband. And the Purim story ends. V'ha'ir Shushan, it says, Sahala v'samecha. There was joy in Shushan. And I always think, you got to shed a tear. Esther's still in the palace. With that, you should excuse me, with that behemoth. With Achashverosh. With a guy who lived with thousands of women to find the right woman. This guy was the worst of the worst. Right? Besides which, he was an anti-Semite. He was evil. Don't think just because Haman was Amalek that he was much better. The Gemara says he was not much better. You know what the Gemara compares Achashverosh and Haman? The Gemara says that it's compared to two guys that live side by side. One guy has this big hole in his field, and the other guy has a mound of the earth. And the guy with the hole in his earth, for years he's thinking, how am I need to fill in that hole. I don't have any earth. And the other guy says, I got this big mound. I want to farm that land. How am I going to get? And then finally they say to themselves, whoa, I'll tell you what. Why don't you take my earth and fill up that was Haman and Achashverosh. They were two sides of one coin. They both hated the Jews. And now she's living with this guy. That's her husband. She's the queen. I know I've said this before, but by me, when I see little Jewish girls prancing around like Esther, I say, oh, what are they doing? What are they doing? You know what I mean? If you think about it, it's horrible. You want it to be Esther. But the bottom line is, Esther gave her life for the Jewish people. She gave her life. She gave her essence. She gave her body. She gave for the Jewish people. This is Esther. It's her day, right? It's Tinus Esther. It's Megillas Esther, right? It's her day. She's the hero of heroes. Anyway, one idea about Esther and her brilliance and her leadership, because from that moment on, that she agreed to go in, if you look at in the Megillah, she became the leader, even though her husband Mordechai, who was a different generation from her, he was the great sage of the generation, he started taking cues from her. Anyway, later on in the Megillah, when Esther is trying to assuage Achashverosh and trying to get Achashverosh over to her side, she invites him to a party. She's going to tell him, she's going to wine and dine him, and she's going to tell him of the decree. But the Megillah tells us that besides Achashverosh, she invited Haman. So the Gemara asks, I'll read you the language. Marasa Esther shezimna es Haman. Why did she do that? What did he have to do with anything? Right? To the contrary, she should have wanted to have a quiet moment with Achashverosh to tell him, you know, that decree you signed, that's my people, and I haven't told you before, but I'm a Jew, and they're going to kill my people, and that decree says you have to kill me, and et cetera, whatever she was going to say. But why does she want him there? So I'll tell you, there's a fat page in the Talmud. You know, the Talmud's there's not a set size. So sometimes the Talmud is, the part of the Talmud is very thin, sometimes very wide. Here's a big page in the Talmud. There's 10 or 12 answers to this question. And each one is a fascinating answer. The brilliance, it's showing the brilliance of Esther, what she was doing. And at the end, the Gemara asks, so which one was right? Which is the right answer? The Gemara says they were all right. She had them all in mind. Let's just today, maybe we'll talk other answers, other aspects, because if they're all right, it's just aspects of what she was up to. But let's just talk about one of them. Reb Nechemia Omer. Reb Nechemia says, Kedei shelo yomru Yisrael, achos yesh lanu bebeis hamelech. She did this for the optics. She wanted the Jewish people who were monitoring what was going on in the palace, she wanted them to say, what? Our Esther? She's inviting Haman? You mean she is together with the enemy? We thought that everything would be good because now our sister, literally our sister, is the queen. But she was nervous. The Gemara goes on. The Gemara goes on, V'yasichu daita min harachamim. They would stop praying to God. Because we got it. We got this. She's going to take care of us. She is the queen. So therefore, she said to herself, this is no good. I need the people to continue to pray. This is not over yet. And therefore, she said, I need to get the message out that maybe I'm a turncoat. Maybe I'm not with them. Maybe I'm not going to save them. And that's what she wanted all of them to think. This is one of the 10 or 12 answers of the Gemara. But you have to wonder, she is putting herself in such a bad situation. I mean, think about that. She's actually trying to get them to think that she is Benedict Arnold, that she is a traitor to the Jewish people. She wanted them to think that so that they would continue to pray. Whoa. Not only that, but besides that, why would they stop praying? She's worried that they'll stop praying because she's there. Why would they stop praying? I mean, from the whole story, just because she was a queen, was that a sure bet that Achashverosh would listen to her? No way. And she's strategizing with Mordechai. How is she going to go in there? And what's she going to say? And we have all sorts of midrashim about what was going on there. He was originally furious. She was She was an old-fashioned queen. She didn't have a say. She was chattel. She couldn't even go in there. So she would tell them what to do. Why would they stop praying? The answer is something which is very important, and I think it's very important for today. And I think we find that, when one good little thing happens that has to do with the war that we're involved in right now, and all of a sudden, oh, everything's going to be good. Oh, everything's going to be good. Patriots explode, it's going to be good. There's a ceasefire, it's going to be good. Donald Trump wins the presidency, it's going to be good. Right? It's going to be good. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. And we forget the fact that it's all in the hands of Hashem. And that's what she wanted to impress on the people. She wanted to tell them, she found it so important. She was willing to have herself looked at as a traitor in order that the Jewish people should continue to daven with the same intensity. They would continue davening because it was crazy to think this is a shoo-in. It was not a shoo-in. But just so the Jewish people should daven with the same intensity, she was willing to do that. She thought that was the wise thing to do. And that was, the Talmud saying, that was the smart thing she should do. She was spot on how important it is to continue intensity of prayer, because prayer is what moves everything. And certainly we, in our day, we are far from out of the woods. We are so in the woods. We are so in the woods. The danger is the situation is so fraught with danger, and Bez Hashem, we should continue our tefillos. Anyway, I thank you all for joining tonight. I hope it gives some food for thought and some new insight into the Megillas Esther. And I wish you all a good evening and a wonderful rest of the week. I know it's a little early, but a good Purim. I hope you join us for the Purim Suda. Okay, all the best. I turn it over to Mrs. Leiter. Wish you a good night.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Amen.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And we'll have a good rest of the week. We'll be in touch. There will not be class next week. So but I'll be in touch. Wish you a good well, this Shabbos, by the way, is Parsha Zachar, when we talked about that. So certainly if you're able to go to shul to listen, and Purim is next, the fast of Esther is next Thursday, and then we have Purim on Friday.
Right.
So, any questions, just give me a call. My husband, I think, is going to do the Tehillim now. It looks like Larry
Okay.
joined. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Very
you.
good.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Okay.
Take care,
Thank you,
everybody.
Reverend.
Okay. Have a
Have a great
good
Shabbos, everyone.
night.
Thank you.
So 9 o'clock. 8 o'clock.
Okay. It's very interesting.
Okay, nice. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Nice, okay,
I'm gonna do.
all right, good. That's good.
Yeah, I wanna, are those prune?
So there's no prune, there's chocolate and there's.
Oh,
like,
chocolate.
strawberry.
Oh, that's the ones that we made.
Okay, good evening, Larry. Good evening.
Those are the.
How are you?
Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi.
How you
I had a
feeling?
little surgical procedure today at 3:00.
Oh, boy.
An epidural on the spine. Hopefully that'll take that part of the pain away.
Amen. Amen. So it should.
But.
Leon.
Hello, Leon. Good evening, Leon. Good
Rabbi,
evening.
good to see you.
Likewise.
So,
Over in Ocean Township.
who is Chaim and Sarah Leiter? Is the H, the big H.
That
Rebbitzin,
is,
the Rebbitzin.
that's my mother's.
Yeah.
Chaim and Sarah. Okay. Sarah is your sister.
No, Sarah's my wife.
Oh, Sarah's your wife.
Yeah,
For you. Oh.
yeah.
And
Okay, so let's get down to
he goes there. for
work.
school. I think this was the first chair he paid.
Larry's enjoying it.
No, it was just, there's a Bible story about, getting the sister first.
I'm gonna be there for Purim and for Pesach.
See.
But I'm going
Uh-huh.
with Sarah.
And then 7 years later,
She's
Okay.
my granddaughter, but she's.
All right, my friends. I think we're up to the next chapter. Yeah. Yeah, that's the fifth chapter. Okay, so here's the introduction to the chapter. Bichlal zeh. In this chapter, Yevor Isser Kabbalas Rechilos, we will explain the prohibition of accepting Rechilos. Okay, accepting Rechilos. Ushmiyaso b'chol tebarativ, and just the listening as well in all of its aspects. V'gam im nichshel bozeh, and also if someone has violated this, someone has stumbled in this sin, Keitzad yisakein hachet hazeh, how does he fix this sin? Bo zayin sifim, and there are 7 halachas over here. All right, so okay, kishem she'asa lekabel lashon hara min haTorah, just as we learned in the first section that it is forbidden to accept lashon hara. Remember, we learned that there's 2 levels. There's just hearing. You're not even allowed to listen to lashon hara, but then acceptance goes beyond that. Sometimes you can listen, right? You can listen, but you just can't accept. All right, 2 levels. Kach, in a similar fashion, also lekabel rechilos min haTorah. It is forbidden to accept rechilos. Same thing. Shigamu bichlal lashon hara. It's also in the category of lashon hara. It's in the family of lashon hara, we could say. Dahainu shelo yamin belibo shemav shesipra lo. Person cannot believe in his heart that which he was told, shekach v'kach asalo ploni, that so-and-so did to him. Can't believe it. Okay, what's rechilos? Rechilos is, you can call it lashon hara on steroids, because it's so, somebody tells you, this is what he did against you, right? So it's lashon hara, but it's beyond lashon hara, because it's not just talking bad about him. It's something that's going to make you hate him, right? So just like by regular lashon hara, you can't be makabel. Certainly here, you can't be makabel. You can't accept it either, right? Kach v'kach osalo ploni, or dibur alav ploni, right? To believe that it's true. V'hamekabel, and someone who does accept it over below ta'aseh, the same lo ta'aseh. He's over on a prohibition, lo sisa shem hashov. Don't bear a false report. Levad shar lavin v'asim estarfin lozeb. Aside from all the other possible prohibitions and mitzvahs associated. I mean, you all remember the introduction to the book where he listed all the potential mitzvahs and averas that have to do with shmiras haloshin. So they all come into rechilos as well. as was explained earlier in the Pesicha, in the introduction to the book. Ayin Sham, check that out. For Amru Chazal, and our sages have said, Shlosha Lashon Hara Haragton. There are 3 people that are killed by Lashon Hara. Number 1, Ha'omro, the guy who says it, the speaker. V'hamakablo, and the one who accepts it. Umishanem, I love, and the person that it was said about. Right, all these 3. Anyone involved. Right? Of course, the one who was spoken about, we know it kills him because, he's the one that gets maligned. He's the one that gets into a fight if it's Rechilus. Then you have the speaker speaking Lashon Hara, accepting Lashon Hara. Okay. Then he tells the story of Doeg and Shaul and David, right? We know the story of Doeg HaAdomi, Shenitra Me'olam Haba, B'sibas HaRechilus. Because of the Rechilos, but he ran and told Shaul that the Novir HaKohanim, that city had helped out David HaMelech, which was Shaul's arch enemy. The Nergo Novir HaKohanim, Asher Nemar Aleim HaRechilos. The Nerag Shaul Achakach. Shaul killed Avor Shekibel as a Rechilos. So oy. So that's a perfect example, right? It kills 3 people. It kills the speaker, which was Doeg, and it kills the listener, who is Shaul. Shaul was responsible for that, and literally, physically killed Novir HaKohanim. But Makablo Yosem in Omro, and the truth is, it's the one who accepts it is worse than the one who says it. V'amru Chazal, and our sages have said, "You call him Mesaper Lashon Hara, v'Makabel Lashon Hara, Roi Lashlicho L'Chalavim." It's someone who speaks Lashon Hara. He's fit to be thrown to the dogs. Shene'emar, where do you get that from? It's not just an expression. The Chazal say this, and they get it from the pasuk. Shene'emar is the pasuk says, "Don't bear a false report." The Samachle, and next to it, lekelav tashlichuno. So it talks about. I think the
Grateful.
talks about treif animals, and it says don't eat it, throw it to the dogs. Right? So Chazal make that play on that juxtaposition, that such a person he deserves such a thing. Let's just begin the next piece. Just begin, and we'll as Hashem in let's see, tomorrow night. Yeah, should be together tomorrow night. We'll get into it. So now he's going to just say, "Va'afal shmiyas rechilos bolvad," just listening. You're not allowed to listen either. "Va'afal shmiyas rechilos bolvad gam kein aser iser gadol." It's also a great prohibition. B'lashon hara or kol lashon hara, uchanal, as we mentioned before in the first section, etc. After be'esa shmiya lo nigmar adayin b'daito amlam yolo. Even if he just listens. Right? He doesn't know, he's agnostic, whether he's going to believe it or not. But just listening is a problem. Nevertheless, isser kabbalah chomer mimenu. Accepting is even worse. The la'inyan shmiya heichadehu meivin. Netchilas asipur shetehei yedias davar zenogelo ala ba memesu. Okay, let me just say it outside, and tomorrow we'll do it inside. Sometimes you can listen. We know this. Sometimes you can listen. If you think that it's something that's going to impact you, right? And there's toeles, and you want to guard yourself from some things, then you can listen, right? If there's somebody tells you Yankel's got it in for you, and he's gonna, it's the old story with Gedalia and Yishmael, the story of Tzom Gedalia, right? That was Rechilus, but that was Rechilus that he should have listened to, not to accept, but he should have listened to. So you have this level, there's different levels of listening and accepting, and it's not always the same halacha by each one. Sometimes you can listen, and sometimes you should listen, whereas you can't accept it. Okay, let's go to our Tehillim. I think here. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay. Shila malo.
Malo,
Go
Shila
ahead,
Eva
I
malo,
love
malo,
it.
Kefena
Rinyan,
la
go
Riman
Ezri.
Yavo Ezri.
Ezrimim
Adonai,
Adonai,
Yosef
Shema,
Shamayim
Yoret,
Vaaretz.
Yayitim Latov,
אל ייתן
Lecha,
למות רגליך עד
Ayinu
ינום
Shimrecha,
שומריך.
Hine lo Yinum, lo
הנה לא
Yishal,
ינום
lo
ולא יישן
Yishal,
שומר ישראל.
Adonai Shimrecha, Adonai
אדוני
Tzilcha,
שומרך, אדוני
Yadminecha,
הצילך על יד
Imam
ימיניך.
HaShemesh lo yakaka
ימם השמש לא
v'yirech
יככה וירח בלילה.
Adonai Yishmerecha Mikol
אדוני ישמורך מכל רע ישמור נפשך.
Adonai Yishmor
אדוני ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם.
מעתה ועד עולם.
Mishaberach,
Yeberach Avosenu Abraham Yitzchak V'Yaakov Hu Yevorech Es Hayolei Tzivo Haganah Yisrael Namdim Am Yishmar Tzinu V'Yarel Hinu Migvol Halvanan V'Yad Midbar Mitzrayim V'Yad Al Levo Harachah V'Yavata V'Avir V'Yan Yitin Adonai Yitzchak Akarim Aleinu Nigafil Yifneihem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yishmor V'Yatzil Es V'Yoleinu Mikol Torah V'Tzukim
Yad ber son
Mavon
enu
Gam
tachtein
Machvav
v'atrin
Yishlach
v'chesed
V'Racha
yishnu
V'Atzvita
v'iteret nitzachon.
B'chol Ma'aseh Yedehem
B'makosuf ki anu
Yedehem
lechem
Yad Ber Shoneinu
v'chimochem
Tachtehem V'Yad Reim
v'chia
B'Chesed
eschem
Yeshua V'Ateres Nitzachon
v'mar
V'Yan Bahem
omed.
HaKasuki
אמן.
Elohechem HaOlekim V'Chem Lihi Elohim Lochem Imai V'Chem Lehoshia Hashem V'Namar Amen.
אמן.
Mishaberach Avosenu Rabbi Yosef Yaakov Moshe David Shlomo. Hu yevare Yerapes HaCholim Yisrael ben Inbal Esther Chana bas Esther. Sarah double bas Miriam Merrill. Reuven ben Rachel Yisrael ben Malkat Torah.
ציפורה אסתר בת מלכה,
Ethan
שלמה
Moshe
בן
Gittel
רך
Chana
ושמחה
ben
חנן
Mashik
דוד,
Elka
חיים
Yisrael
גדליה,
ben
בן
Bar bas
פסיה גולדה
Miriam
ברכה, חיה בת מלכה זרעית
Rivka.
ומסיליה, אללה בת אינסה, תרצה בת מרים, גותה
Chashtal
בת
ben Risa Chaim Michal
חסרה,
Do.
פסיה בת נחה, ראובן בן חיה, שלמה
Ben
לוי בן פשע,
Freda
אפרים בן
Mitzvahs.
פסיה,
Yocheben.
חנה בת טובה,
Shalom Dov ben Henya.
גיל משה בן כרמלה, וחנה דינה בת זוהר, זלטה, כל ישראל, כבנך ובנאמן, אמנתה ברכה לדע אדוני,
Ben Chaya, Reza, Moshe ben Maria, Aryeh ben Chavaleya, ben Yamin, Daniel, Margalit, Alabas Zina. Philip ben Rivka Leia, Bezvas Necha, Miriam, Belabas Nechama, Riva, Les ben Ramah Yosef, Ben Chaya Michal. Yaakov les Nachana Nesha, from Moshe ben Gittel. Aaron ben Dela Rachel, Peres ben Chasar Gittel, Mertar bas Bina, bas Chana Yana, bas Susan, Levis bas Naomi Ros. Yo Moshe ben Carmel, Chana bas Toiv, ben Gittel, Ashters bas Basya. Israel ben Dela Rivka, Tis bas Miriam. Yos ben Victoria, Chaya bas Chana, Fenches bas Rivka, Ben Pesia. Shido. Didn't bat to Rivka, Dav Marcha ben Rivka, Victor Sasson, Meir ben Rachel, Yoch, and Gedai, and Yaakov ben Pesha Golda. That's a girl ben Chai, we was the voter, and you get was the Asima, you said Yaakov ben Itka, Reuven Avram ben Leosima, Yaakov ben Miriam, Nina, Yehuda ben Chai, Yaakov ben Pesha, the Pesha Gitla, and Yehuda ben Shoshana, Zav Besvegi, Yaakov ben Tar. However, Shach the spell of over Amskai, Sekos Racham Achalim, Lachlim Alraf Boats, and Mazika Michayosam. Taflahem Meher, Vushman Shamayim, Bechol Eva Reyem. Hogizem So Shachol Yisrael, Refuas HaNefesh, Refuas HaGuf, Ashtabu Galovis Man Kariv, and Neymar Amen.
אמן.
Okay, Ashikoyach. Thanks for joining tonight, coming early. I really appreciate it. All right, have a good night, one
Rabbi,
and all.
we do everything for you.
Oh,
You do everything for us.
thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thank you so much, Leon. Thank you.
Amen.
So much time.
Be well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.